You've been practicing making great lines, checking out a ton of bebop licks, arpeggios, chromatic enclosures, and now your solos sound like this. Which isn't bad, but at the same time, if you listen to somebody like Wes Montgomery or Kenny Burrel, then there is something missing. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can start practicing to play like this, and it's actually a lot easier than you think, especially if you're already comfortable making lines. And this is something that can definitely take up your playing quite a few levels. My name is Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The thing that's different about how Wes and Kenny Burrel improvise is that they play shorter, stronger, but also simpler phrases. And as you'll see in this video, if you start working and practicing like this can really make your solos a lot more interesting, and it's gonna open up for you to be creative in completely different ways. Forget about only playing long eighth note lines and spelling out all the changes all the time, and also some changes that are not really there. Just focus on playing short phrases. It's gonna open up your playing, and it's also gonna show you how to improve some things quite easily because you have room to do so.
What do you mean playing shorter phrases? What's shorter phrases? You made 250 videos telling me to practice my arpeggios with chromatic enclosures and 16-note triplets.
Of course, you need to know your arpeggios and your scales, and you want to know what notes you have available, but you don't want to play them all the time. So you want to start working with shorter phrases, keeping it simple, making it easy for yourself. And I think you would probably want to start with phrases that are like 2, 3, 4 notes long. And actually that's more common than you might think. The example that I mostly use for this would be Wes's solo on 4 and 6. I think I've used it in other videos as well, and that's this solo. In this example, Wes is playing pretty much 4 phrases. The first one is really short. Then we get the longest phrase in the example. Still actually a fairly short phrase. Then this one. And finally this 4-note phrase. So you can hear that everything is pretty simple. There's not really anything going on with the harmony, and he's just really playing the song and nothing else. And you want to do the same kind of thing when you start out with this. So make it easy for yourself. Play phrases that are simple, related to the chord, so think mostly in chord tones, maybe some scale runs, arpeggios, simple things. Because if you have to play a phrase that's 3 notes long and 2 of them are chromatic leading notes, it can be difficult to make it into a really strong melody. And the same goes for intervals. So if you stick with more arpeggio, triad and scale run, then that's going to be a lot stronger than having a motif or a phrase like this one. Once you start playing shorter phrases and fewer notes, then there's gonna be a lot more space in your solos, and that's actually gonna help you find the room to also be more creative with the rhythm. In fact, I think it's gonna come pretty much by itself, because you can't really rely on playing sort of fancy upper structures and enclosures because you don't have enough notes to do that, so you have to be more creative with the rhythm to play a solo that sounds good. It's gonna help all by itself as soon as you start working like this. And you really just need to sort of lean back, feel the space that's there, and then try to come up with some more interesting ideas with the rhythm, with a few notes that you're playing. This is really about motivic development. When you play a solo, then you're of course playing different phrases next to each other, and it's very important that there is some sort of connection between the different phrases. And that's simply just because otherwise it's gonna sound completely random and not make any sense to you or to the listener. So one easy way to connect the different phrases is of course just to repeat them, because in that way then there is a very clear connection between the phrase that you just played and the phrase that you're going to play. This is something that you're gonna hear in pretty much all the great players. Wes does this all the time. You will also hear it with Keith Jarrett or Kurt Rosenwinkel. They all work with motifs. When it comes to playing these short phrases, then that's really just a way to make it easy for you to start repeating them and move them through the harmony, and in that way create that connection between the different phrases in your solo. That's really something you'll see in most music also. When you use motivic development, then the motif that you're working with is a motif. It's a short phrase. A good example would be the first part of Autumn Leaves. The main motif is 4 notes long. And then it's repeated. One more time. And one more time. So this works because it's only 4 notes and we can clearly hear, okay, we just heard this, then we hear this version of it that's just moved in the scale, but it makes sense to us because we recognize it from just having heard it. This is not going to be possible if you take the first phrase of Donna Lee. That's not going to make a great motif. It's too complicated, and if you repeat it with any kind of variation on it, then it's going to be unrecognizable. A few things you want to do if you practice this is to, again, keep it simple, keep the motif short, really 2 or 3 notes, and then maybe you can even try to just move around one motif a little bit on one chord just to get used to how that feels, to have one melody that's still something flexible that you can develop. Another thing you want to do is that you want to just take that through a song in time. If it's too difficult to play it in time the first time around, then just sit down and go through the chords one by one and see how it is to move that melody there so that you get used to how that works as well. Of course, you want to do this eventually in time, but you can start doing it rubato. A great way to develop these shorter phrases, if you start treating them like motifs, is that you can add different endings to them. So if you're moving a motif around in a song, you can also start adding some extra notes to it. And since it's only going to be a few notes in the beginning that you're working with now, it's going to be a lot easier to just add an extra phrase behind it. And that way, you're maybe adding different endings to a motif, and at some point you can maybe take one of the endings and turn that into a motif. And really what that means is that you're starting to become a lot more free in how you connect the different phrases, but they are always connected. And you're also starting to mix up how you're playing short phrases and longer phrases in a very natural way. If you focus too much on the wrong things, then you are in fact working against yourself, and you're going to make it more difficult for yourself to learn how to play jazz and develop as a jazz musician. That's really what this video is about, but there are other aspects. Especially there's one thing that I think a lot of people forget that they need to work on if they want to learn how to play jazz, and that's what I'm talking about in this video. So if you want to make sure that you're practicing the right things, then check out that video.